Welcome to the T-Pac Arcade. Today's game is Venture for the Atari 2600. In this 1982 dungeon crawler from Exidy and Coleco, Winky the smiley face archer is treasure hunting in monster-filled chambers. And that's, pretty much it. Don't get eaten by a monster. The gameplay here is split into two parts. First, you find yourself in one of two dungeons with 4 chambers each. Here you're defenseless against the wandering hall monsters, so you just want to navigate your Winky Dot into a chamber opening without getting caught. Side note, Winky is already a silly enough name, and saying Winky Dot somehow makes it 75% worse. How am I supposed to feel like a daring dungeon explorer when I sound like the protagonist of a preschool TV show? Anyway, part 2 is inside the chamber, where you find 3 monsters and a treasure. Here you can fire your bow and arrow, which is just a small square resting against your smiley face, aka another Winky Dot. But if you can help it, you want to avoid shooting the monsters until after collecting the treasure, or else they aren't worth any points. Sometimes there's no other way though, and you've just got to barge into those chambers with guns a-blazing, or else you're not going to survive long enough to get a taste of the treasure anyway. And a word of advice, don't run into a monster's rotting corpse after it's been hit with an arrow, cause it'll still kill you. Also cause it's unsanitary and probably smells awful. There's a reason Winky's smiley face has no nose. Once you collect the treasure from all 4 chambers, you move on to the second dungeon. And once you collect all 4 treasures there, you loop back to the first. Except now, the monsters are faster than they were before, which is a real problem because they were pretty erratic to begin with. See, each type of monster seems to behave differently, but the movements are all ostensibly random. Also, don't take too long to clear a treasure chamber, or else an invincible hall monster will wander in to eat you. Speaking of the monsters, they're some of my favorite Atari graphics, bar none. We've got humanoid baddies that look like they're scared of each other and screaming with their arms up. Sine wave worms, which are equally scary because they remind me of math class. Green spiky things that are just as likely to be spiders as they are to be freeze-framed cartoon booger splatter sneezes. Orange guys with either 2 really big eyeballs or 2 really small heads. Nondescript shapes with legs. These guys kind of look like blenders maybe. And plain old gray dudes that might not even be monsters in the first place. They were just sick of their regular 9-to-5s and thought being a dungeon guardian would spice up their boring lives, until realizing they would constantly be attacked by a smiley face named Winky, and there are no union benefits for dungeon guardians. Also, the hall monsters look like hats. Just don't put them on, or you might end up like the garbled pixel pile corpse left in the wake of a dead monster, which is just as charming as it is morbid. The treasure graphics are neat too, since there are all sorts of crowns and chalices and gems and stuff. If only Winky's smiley face was a little less, generic. Not that there's anything wrong with smiley faces, it just feels out of place in a game with so much visual personality otherwise. The sound design doesn't have quite so much personality either, considering how sparse the audio effects are, but I do like the ascending and descending scales for entering and exiting chambers, the violent din of an incoming hall monster, and the electric hum inside the wall room, which is the most novel aspect of this game. See, unlike every other chamber in Venture, the wall room has no monsters, just, walls. But they're electrified and they move back and forth, so you don't want to run into those unless you're interested in becoming a fried Winky Dot. No longer a preschool TV protagonist, but a whimsical carnival food of questionable origin. Venture is pretty easy to loop once, but extremely difficult to loop twice or more. The monsters just get way too quick and unpredictable after the first round. Or right away if you set the difficulty switches to more advanced skill levels, which I certainly didn't do. My goal was just to get a 6-digit score. Not all that impressive, but it was a good enough challenge to make me feel like I've accomplished something here. I mean, it's not like I get to keep my treasure after I turn the Atari off, no matter how much I'd like to show up to work in an 8-bit crown and boast about my successful dungeon heist. My favorite part of Venture, and my least favorite part of Venture, are the entering and exiting mechanics. You can leave a chamber as soon as you simply approach a doorway, which is really handy for quick escapes, but you can't enter a chamber without precisely threading through a narrow gap, which makes it tough not to get stuck against a wall and killed by a hall monster before you can dislodge yourself. Overall, Venture is just my kind of dungeon crawler. Straightforward, simple, and full of monsters with personality to spare. If only Winky wasn't a generic smiley face, and wasn't named like a preschool TV character, or a whimsical carnival food of questionable origin.